Exploration is all but dead. Bioshock had plenty of nooks and crannies and back alleys to rifle through. Infinite occasionally gives you a closet.
To start with, there are many locked rooms and secrets that you can miss on your first playthrough. Your own footage proves it, as you show 2 playthroughs with 2 radically different stats. One of these playthroughs, you searched and got upgrades. The other, you missed stuff. Second, the linearity allows the game to keep its focus. As discussed before, Infinite is not a resource management game. You yourself recognize that intent. Nooks and crannies, as you describe, at the scale that you would prefer, are completely pointless here, the same way they would be pointless in Portal. Since Infinite is more action-oriented, it needs to place its focus more on the combat, giving the players a variety of tools they can use, with a moment of pause to recollect themselves. Linear design allows for both, so the players won't get lost or confused or even frustrated. As an example, let's look at Sly 2, Band of Thieves. It's a stealth platformer game. While there are some neat secrets to find throughout the levels, platforming challenges based around the stealth mechanics are the primary focus. If the player has trouble getting to the next mission, which is the meat of the game, they'll get frustrated. The most infamous example is the 3rd level, The Predator Awakens.
Where am I going? I know I've just wasted all that, but... Not cocaine, Marshall, spice. He's had too much spice, alright? How the f*** do you get over to that vine? I don't get it.
This level was pure torture. There was no fun in exploring this. At best, searching for clue balls and treasure had its joy, but players just wanted to get to the missions. While Sly 3 wasn't perfect, it made the correct decision in simplifying the overworld, as well as giving Bentley and Murray special mechanics to make traversal easier for them. In short, depending on the game, linear level design has its advantages. And that's not just me saying this. Someone else agrees with me. Campster!
The gameplay is largely incidental and amounts to random shit they make the player do to get to the next content chunk. This is what legendary game designer Chris Crawford once called a book with its pages stuck together. You know, the non-game content is what you came for, and this stupid, time-wasty bullshit is what's preventing you from getting to the next content chunk. Now, don't get me wrong. To paraphrase a friend, it's one of the most beautiful tunnels I've ever walked down. There's love and effort seeping out of every street corner and every scripted sequence. Every gameplay segment is polished to a shine, and all of them play well, being kinesthetically pleasing, varied, and well-paced. There's no doubt that this game is entertaining and at the top of its class in terms of polish and care. But the very philosophy of the game is one that disregards its own mechanics. I mean, let's look at how much force variety there is in the game. Small arms combat with large numbers of weak enemies, physics puzzles, platforming in precarious situations, driving a boat, heavy weapons combat against large powerful enemies, driving a car with a gun, engaging in epic set pieces, driving a boat with a gun, dicking around with the gravity gun until the end of the game, bouncing around like an idiot until the end of the game. Set-piece boss battles at the end of the game. This is especially apparent in Half-Life 2, where each chapter or two has a totally different gameplay gimmick than the last. It's as if they said, we want this game to be 12 hours long. How can we fill a game with that much content and yet keep it fresh? I know, let's completely change what the player's doing every 2 hours. Half-Life's gameplay is simply what happens between content chunks. Kill these guys and we'll let you get a sneak peek at the G-Man.
I think you've earned it.
Kill these guys and now we'll let you talk to Alex some more. We know you want to. We engineered her that way. Now drive this boat over here and we can show you this great scripted event with this neat water tower crashing down around you. It's exciting, it's exhilarating, and it's empty as all get out. I didn't cause any of these awesome events. I don't really get a choice in how the world is saved. Neither the player nor Gordon Freeman have any idea what's going on, nor do they get to make any decisions about how things turn out. In a way, Half-Life is more of a roller coaster or a theme park ride than a game proper. There's a specific feeling it's trying to elicit by engineering a linear, scripted experience. It doesn't matter if you're shooting guys, riding in a car, or observing a grandiose set piece. It's just the means by which the ride is delivering its content. It's been 13 years since the original Half-Life. Jesus Christ, I feel old. But we haven't even gotten any narrative closure about, well, anything yet. In light of that fact, let me posit that the G-Man is simply a metaphor for Valve themselves, putting the player exactly where they need to be, building them up, and ensuring they experience exactly what is needed before stopping the ride and putting them away until next time. If Gordon Freeman is a fantasy insertion character for the player, I think it's fair to say G-Man performs the same function for developers. They know you don't have any real sense of choice and that you'll eagerly tackle whatever random assignments they may have for you. I don't think it's an accident that Half-Life and Half-Life 2 both begin and end on trains. This isn't exactly a subtle metaphor for the series. They're rides on tracks with plenty of things to look at outside of the tram windows, but no matter how much you may bounce around the cabin, the tram's going to go where it's going to go, and you're going to experience what they have planned for you.
Rather than offer you the illusion of free choice, I will take the liberty of choosing for you.
Valve seem to be acutely aware of the sort of game they made with Half-Life. I just hope the audience that praises it so much is aware as well.
Now, that sounds strangely similar to how you described Infinite earlier in this video.
And that goes for the environmental design too. The entire game feels less like a trip to a city in the clouds and more like a trip to Walt Disney World. No small part of this is due to all of the turn-of-the-century Americana, but the sense of artificiality goes quite deeper than that. The entire game is suffocatingly linear, and you'll find yourself wondering why a city of free-floating islands has only one path in and out of any given area, and whether men, women, and children all use skyhooks to get around. There are plenty of doors to nowhere and environmental design meant to funnel you down the intended path. Giant signs label Shantytown and the Factory and the Hall of Heroes to announce that you're entering a differently themed area, the way signs might point out how you're entering Frontierland or Tomorrowland at Disney. You'll see crowded beaches and city streets one moment, and as soon as combat begins, they're curiously empty, as though Columbia also has the ability to transform itself into a gladiatorial arena at a moment's notice. The experience is one of playing a first-person shooter themed after the Magic Kingdom's Main Street USA. It's a gorgeous, lovingly crafted homage to turn-of-the-century small-town America, but it's also very obviously a scaled-down facade, and instead of emptying out for a parade, it empties out so you can throw fire grenades at people.
Of course, you may be wondering how this proves my thesis. Well, Campster apparently experienced a backlash over these comments, as he backpedaled faster than Ken Levine did in Burial at Sea.
Anyway, so a lot of the complaints I get with this video is that, I complain that Half-Life is linear, and that's really a problem with the script. That's really a problem with the way I frame my argument. It's not that Half-Life is linear that makes it bad. I mean, it doesn't help the game that it's so thoroughly on rails, because it basically does devolve the gameplay down to sort of this cutscene delivery service. But what I really meant by that, and I wrote about a blog post about this, you can see it on my blog, but what I really meant is that the linearity and the constantly switching up of game mechanics, if I'm being super harsh on the game, it sort of feels like the linearity and the random switching of mechanics, if I'm being harsh on the game, feels like it is funneling you down a series of arbitrary things to keep you interested every 2 hours. That's when I'm being... Oh god, this joke is horrible. It goes on for far too long. If I'm being more generous to the game, and my opinion on the game now basically is, it feels like the developers were trying to experiment with the first-person shooter genre in the abstract, and were sort of toying with the core mechanics that they had at their disposal. What could you do from a first-person perspective with walking around and shooting things, and occasionally interacting with a vehicle or a scripted event? And that's really where I think the game lies. I think it's somewhere in between the two. It's somewhere in between trying to keep you interested and trying to deliver content, and also the developers just saying, what can we do? And it's one of the reasons I still think that we haven't seen a Half-Life 3 is not so much that this scene probably would have made it if I did this thing again. I think this is somewhat relevant, although I would have used my own footage. This is back when I was taking footage from other people. This is terrible. But yeah, I think that yeah, I think that if you really do have all these different mechanics, you lack an identity. Like, Half-Life has no singular mechanical identity. At best, it maybe has the gravity gun. And even that, at this point, in an era of havoc physics being applied pretty much uniformly, you don't really have even that to go on. I think most games have the ability to pick up and manipulate physics objects these days. Maybe not to the degree that the gravity gun did. You can't pick up giant boulders, but or shoot cars to move them slightly. But aside from that, the game really does have, it has vehicle segments, it has shooting segments. Like, if I said Serious Sam, if I said I'm going to make a game like Serious Sam, you know what that means. I'm making a game like Serious Sam. I'm making a game that is basically a modern Doom where you run around and shoot hordes of enemies. If I said I'm making, I don't know, a sequel to Super Meat Boy, or if I'm making a Deus Ex System Shock game. These are games that have sort of a systemic identity. Half-Life really lacks that. It bounces back and forth between all these different systems, and as a result, really doesn't have one to call its own. And I think that's really the sort of the root of what I was complaining about with a lot of the linearity complaints, are that it's not so much that you move from plot point A to plot point B, it's that you move from plot point A to plot point B, and along the way you do random gameplay that isn't really identifiable to the Half-Life brand or to the Half-Life franchise, or to really distinguish itself in any capacity. It's stuff you've done elsewhere, and arguably stuff you've done elsewhere better. Vehicle combat or shooting. Not to say that any of it is weak, it's all really strongly implemented. And here's the list, I guess, of you do this. And yes, that was a horrible Plinkett impersonation. Again, references and being goofy and dumb, and I generally try to avoid that crap these days. But I mean, do you see what I mean? Where you have all these different mechanics that don't add up to any one thing. There's machine gun fire against God, smug jackass. I fully empathize with everyone who writes horrible things about me watching this.
Aw, thank you.
I don't know. I like Half-Life. I do. Like I say in the video, and I'm surprised by how many people think I walked away from Half-Life going, this is the stupidest game ever. I hate Half-Life. I really like Half-Life. I do. I mean, again, not only is it actually important, but it's a really memorable, great game. But it's a great game that's sort of a piecemeal game. It's a great game that is, 5 really good games rolled up in an interesting universe that makes it a great, memorable experience. I'm speaking primarily from a systems perspective when I say that it really doesn't function cohesively as a whole, and that it's really designed to deliver scenes like this. This is the whole, Resonance Cascade scene, or this ending scene. It's really, the game's about delivering those chunks of scripted content, and it's not really about any one mechanic. It's not about any one game system. And I think that's to the detriment of the game overall. That it's just sort of this amorphous, we're just having fun with first-person shooters, and the result is a story that has no conclusion and an adventure that has no real aim. I don't know. But yeah, I like it. I mean, it's as far as sort of vague, structurally unspecific stories without end and mechanics without cohesion, everything about it works. I mean, I'm still emotionally invested even though there's no ending and no structure to it, and I still enjoy the mechanics even though we switch off what those mechanics are every 5 to 10 minutes. Well, not every 5 to 10 minutes, every hour or two in the game. So I mean, it works as a whole. I mean, the game does function well, and I look forward to whatever they come up with Half-Life 3, or come up with to include in Half-Life 3, but anyway.
So, there you have it, folks. Camster is admitting, right here, that linear level design is actually effective. Of course, one could argue that Camster finds linear level design appropriate in its own right, but just doesn't think it fits for Bioshock. Unfortunately, he has already forfeited the right to this defense.
You can play System Shock, System Shock 2, Bioshock, and Bioshock 2, and chart how their Ultima Underworld influence is lessened as they've become more and more a stock shooter with every iteration. With Bioshock Infinite, that transformation is more or less complete. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Human Revolution simplified or removed a lot of Deus Ex's mechanics, but it still felt true to the series, yet modern.
You yourself have officially conceded the point, Campster. There's no need to dwell on this any further.
But more than the lack of spaces to explore, there's just not all that much to find. Bioshock had health kits and Eve hypos to hoard, one-use weapon upgrade stations, tonics, crafting supplies, auto-hack tools, and more. Infinite has boiled everything down to two core resources you can carry, money and lockpicks.
Nope. There's also ammo, spare guns, health items, and salts, which you show on screen again, giving you a chance to revitalize yourself after every combat scenario. Half-Life 2 did the same thing in between action sequences.
Everything about it works.
Also, we have gear and infusions, both of which you acknowledge and then dismiss. Maybe you just ignored them, in which case that might explain why your experience was so bad. And you can't say these don't count, because you listed upgrade stations and tonics in your list for the original game's collectibles.
Bioshock had health kits and Eve hypos to hoard, one-use weapon upgrade stations, tonics, crafting supplies, auto-hack tools, and more.
Either you failed to proofread your script, or you are lying.
Even the number of audio logs are cut in half from Bioshock.
And? Why would they need more? The backstory is already dispersed through kinetoscopes and background conversations, in addition to environmental details. You're just asking for bloat at this stage.
And there just really is no incentive to poke around the already linear, simplified levels.
Except to find upgrades and restore my munitions and MP, which you really should have done, Campster, if your late game footage is anything to speak of. You're over halfway through the game, and your MP bar has 0 upgrades. By Emporia, if you had collected infusions, you should have a fully upgraded or mostly fully upgraded MP bar. Yes, I know you want to invest your infusions into the shield, I get it, but there are enough infusions in the game that you could have done both. Seriously, I have a full bar of salts by this point, even when I'm playing the original without bonus infusions. There are 24 infusions across the original game. 4 of them are in Emporia, and 1 is at the tail end of Comstock House. That means there are 19 infusions Campster could have gotten before the points presented in his footage, enough to almost completely upgrade his shield and MP, or to upgrade all 3 bars halfway. His argument that there is no incentive to explore is false. His lack of resources and strength in the second half of the game is the incentive. You want to avoid that. Now, to be fair, he does show footage of him playing the late game with more infusions, but that only makes his point worse. Once again, his own footage is proving him wrong by showcasing the consequences of not searching around. Moreover, it makes him look like a liar, both in terms of incentive and in terms of secrets and levels.
God, and this is just the stuff that's been removed. We haven't even gotten to how it actually plays yet. And, well, look, the combat in the Shock series has always been sort of bad, but that's okay, because it's always been backed by more interesting systems than how the guns feel in your hand. System Shock 1 and 2 were very much about resource management and rig building, and Bioshock tried to get you to play different factions of Rapture off of one another with traps and security hacks and plasmids. The fact that the gunplay was loose and flaccid never really mattered because that wasn't what the game was ever about at its core. But here, shooting is all that's left, yet it still feels like you're firing Nerf guns and pea shooters at unflinching bullet sponges. The core gunplay was one of the original Bioshock's biggest criticisms, and it has not been improved here despite the increased focus.
To start with, I find it strange that the first example you showed to demonstrate the sponginess of enemies is the Zealot, a heavy hitter. These are elite enemies, meant to be stronger than the average foe. This one was the first ever encounter for its type, making it effectively a boss battle. This is not a good example to point to if you want to make a general statement about the average enemy. More importantly, you yourself prove that they aren't bullet sponges right here. You shoot a man in the face with a shotgun, and he dies. I watched this clip multiple times, and he is at full health, Campster. Bear in mind, this shotgun has no upgrades. I've checked. There are no shotgun upgrades available for purchase before the Hall of Heroes. This is the weakest version of the shotgun. Now, you could argue that Campster is just playing this on easy mode, but I have no way of knowing that, because Campster doesn't share that particular info. I can only react to what I see, And what I see is Campster bemoaning that the enemies are sponges and that the gunplay is poor as he one-shots a guy with an under-upgraded shotgun. In short, one of these examples was manipulative and the other was contradictory. Moving on, there are other tools, those being the skylines, tears, possessed enemies, vigors, and the gear. Skyline strikes are a guaranteed instant kill for most enemies. Bucking Bronco with Undertow and even Charge next to a railing are all guaranteed an instant kill. Undertow with a plasma coil is intense damage. Tears can bring in decoys to buy you time or oil slicks to burn enemies alive. Pyromaniac and the Shock Jacket gear deal damage 50% of the time when struck, and can be weaponized when used with other protective abilities and equipment. It's not just the shooting. If you're going through the game just shooting and ignoring everything else, that's the problem. The enemies are not bullet sponges if you use the game's mechanics against them. The closest the game has is the Rocket Soldier, and even he goes down quickly with the right combinations. The more tools the game gives you, the objectively harder it's going to be if you don't use them. Lastly, I'm going to bring up Call of Duty again. I played through Call of Duty Black Ops 2 as research for this response. During my playthrough, I did find that enemies went down quicker to my shots, though that's more than likely because I played on normal, while Infinite I played exclusively on 1999 mode. However, it did me few favors because of my inability to tell them apart from my environment. Moreover, the fact that they went down under few shots, combined with the large amount of ammo it gave me with most guns, left me without much incentive to change guns often, if ever. Compared to Bioshock Infinite, in addition to playing 1999 mode, I exclusively play the scavenger hunt run, which mandates you go through the game without buying any supplies. I rarely ever found this difficult, as I swap guns often. In fact, I used to think that the game threw too much ammo at me, with weapons like the shotgun and the sniper rifle being in need of a serious scaling down. However, when I look at these two games side by side, I find that the ammo limits in Infinite were far tighter, prompting more of a need to shift tactics. Maybe they made the gun stronger in COD, but it made the need to switch virtually non-existent.
Remember how Bioshock's plasmids had 3 types of elemental damage, various plasmids to get the enemies to play off of one another, bees and decoys for crowd control, and cyclones to let you set traps? Pretty much all vigors boil down to some combination of crowd control, direct damage, and trap, which means each vigor is effectively interchangeable. Each can be quite powerful, but that's the problem. Spamming Bucking Bronco as a crowd control and damage amplifier isn't all that different than spamming Murder of Crows as a crowd control and damage amplifier. This doesn't take what Bioshock did and move it forward, it takes it way, way back. About the only vigor that has any unique utility is tossing people off of Columbia with Undertow. And if I'm being honest, it's too little too late after Dishonored's gust of wind power.
Oh no, you don't, Campster. You're overlooking Charge and Return to Sender, both of which have unique effects. Both of them are effectively damage on the surface, but there is a nuance. Charge hurls impact damage at enemies, but at the cost of bringing you closer to them. If you're a person who prefers to keep a distance, then that's not a cost you'd be willing to pay. Further, given that Charge relies on the skyhook, melee gear amplify it, so it can be used as a way of weakening enemies so that they can be killed by other things, or as a means of quickly regaining health. Return to Sender doesn't fall into any of the traditional categories. It's not stun, and it's definitely not crowd control. At best, it's a trap and it can be used as damage, but there's more to it than that. It absorbs and redirects enemy damage, and, like Charge, it can be used more creatively with the right gear. Return to Sender shots can be dropped as traps, which can be used as a makeshift cover. More importantly, since they're traps, you can combine them with Ghost Posse, a gear that takes control of enemy guns whenever they trip a trap. In short, you can combine these elements to create a makeshift mini turret. On top of that, with the right upgrade, it can absorb enemy ammo, assuming you're using the same guns. Given the complaints that you and your friends have about the ammo limitations, this is a very handy power to have. Then we have Bucking Bronco, Crows, and Shock Jockey. These are the proper stun vigors in the game. This is an overlap, yes. It is a flaw, yes, but it is blown severely out of proportion. To start with, Crow is a crowd stun, while the other two are individual stun, and this is shown in their MP cost. Since Crow affects more enemies, it takes a larger chunk of your MP. At best, this difference is nullified by an upgrade that gives Shock Jockey the ability to stun multiple people at once, and that is a problem, but the initial function is different. And Bucking Bronco is Sadly, another stunt. However, it still has a unique usage. When you're next to a railing, combining Bucking Bronco with Undertow, Charge, or any gun of your choice allows you to knock them over the edge. It's effectively an instant kill. It comes with a serious cost, of course, in that you can't loot the enemy's corpses, so whether it's worth that price is up to you. And building off of that, skylines and freight hooks are prevalent all throughout the game, and they all change up the fight depending on what gear you have and how you intend to use them. I already discussed this a couple times earlier, but allow me to show another example through the Let's Player GOM.
Skyline buff that lets us automatically reload when we go onto the skyline. Aha! I found something that I think is going to be a little bit better. Okay, that. We're using this one. So I can just keep on jumping. Dude, I am the ultimate warrior. Alright? Yo, what's up? Whoops, didn't mean to do that. I'll catch the salts in a second. Give me a moment. Alright.
The only thing GOM was missing was either Vampire's Embrace or Death from Above, depending on whether you want an increased offense or near infinite health boost. Yes, this isn't vigor focused, but this is another possible strategy that the player has on hand. More importantly, it's a combo that's only effective when skylines and freight hooks are available, and sometimes they aren't. So as powerful and addictive as it is, GOM would have to make peace with using other combos in other fights. I'll discuss this further with Camster's next comment.
That game was only 5 months ago, and it did the magical powers and gunplay things so much better than this. You get a sense of controlling your environment, of planning your attacks, of having powers that genuinely have utility and play off of one another. Freezing time to set up multiple arrow shots in one instant, or tricking guards to run into a spring wire trap. I said in my Dishonored video that it created a ludic language to let players express themselves in, and if that's true, then Bioshock Infinite is a toddler's illegible scribblings.
The game isn't about playing in advance, it's about improvising with what you have. It's why the gear are randomized, and why heavy hitters like the Handyman tend to appear midway through every fight. In the 15-minute demo, a player is presented with a tear in which they can bring forth a piece of cargo as cover. The game even labels it as cover both times you look at it. During the big gunfight at the end, the player uses Bucking Bronco to launch enemies into the air just as they open that tear, which leads to all of them getting rammed. In other words, the player took a mechanic specifically marketed as a defensive tool and repurposed it as a makeshift weapon. This tear and subsequent combo did not make it into the game, quite sadly. But the spirit of it did. All throughout the game, there are tears and gear and vigors that can be combined in unique ways to increase offense and defense, several of which I've already shown. To showcase this further, I'm going to lift the clip from Gamefront's Bioshock Infinite's Combat Doesn't Suck video.
But before I get into that, I wanted to address Kirk Hamilton's illustration of a typical Bioshock Infinite encounter and how a similar encounter would play out for me. I see some guards up ahead. They don't see me yet. Okay, now they see me. Everyone is shooting at me. I fire off some Murder of Crows and make them stop for a second, and I kill as many as I can. I realize, though, that Murder of Crows really doesn't stop them long enough and is probably not ideal for this situation. Crap! A turret! I hear its signature ringtone, and I know that I'm... Wait, actually, this is just what I need. I locate and possess the turret because, you know, we learned about this way early on in the game. Damn, the rocket infantry took out my turret before it could do much damage. But, fortunately, I have enough salt for one more possession. The machine gun I brought in through a tear got killed, but there's another option. I can call in the grappling points and use skyline strikes to finish the rest of these guys off. And that's just an example of one encounter. One of the things I love about Bioshock Infinite's combat is that every encounter is designed to be different.
I'll leave you to watch the rest of the video on your own. It's good. What I want to focus on is the tear that Mitchell weaponized. It was specifically to give the players easy reach to higher ground, as discussed here.
I feel there's more where that came from. Whenever I'd get anxious, tears have a way of appearing. Booker, do you see those tears? We can use them against Slate's men. That tear will get us access to higher ground. And that one will give us a turret.
And some cover.
But Mitchell found another use for it. Now, this isn't a particularly easy trick to pull off, as you're still vulnerable jumping to and from a skyhook, but it is doable. Let's look at a different fight in the same area.
What is that?
Comstock ships. He's coming for Slate.
It was Slate who killed for his country at Wounded Knee! It was Slate who stormed the gates at Peking! Slate! Slate! Comstock's coming, Booker. But our lives won't satisfy him. Oh, no. He won't rest until he's turned us into tin. I won't let him. He took my past. But that's all he's getting from me.
Just give us the vigor. We don't need to do this.
Here you go, boys! A soldier's death awaits!
In this fight, Slate sends his last men at you. This is, in effect, the climax of the Hall of Heroes. You are given 2 tears primarily, one for medkits and one for shotguns. However, what many players don't know is that the freight hook tear from earlier is still here. You are given 3 primary ways to do this fight. Find higher ground to protect yourself as you rain fire on your enemies, stay to the ground and shoot them directly, or use the freight hooks for skyline strikes. Each one has a benefit and a risk. The first option allows you plenty of cover, as enemies can't jump up and get to you. However, there are few resources up here, so you have to be careful with what guns you bring and how you use them. The second option allows you greater access to resources, as the majority of salts, medkits, and munitions are down below. The challenge is that enemies are encircling you the entire time, so you are incredibly vulnerable. The third option gives you instant kills for most enemies, so you don't have to burn through ammo or MP. Unfortunately, as stated before, you are incredibly vulnerable when using these unless you have access to invulnerability gear, which I will discuss later. While all of these are just fight and kill, there is an obvious mechanical difference between each of them that makes them more functional than the other, depending on what gear you have and what you're most comfortable using. Each of these are elements of creative play that allow you to utilize the world as your weapon. Yes, you can't latch mines onto trash cans or put trap bulls next to health stations, but the strategy is still there. It just lies in the mechanics that you routinely ignored.
It's not a series of systems that let you plan and execute brilliant moves by combining useful powers in interesting ways. It's simply a bedlam of spamming your favorite vigor in whatever 2 guns you happen to have.
Hold it! I know you didn't use the vigors, and I can prove it. First, let's watch Diecast 52, in which they discuss the Burial at Sea DLC as a whole. Let's listen to this juicy clip.
Yeah, I got confused by that because at some point I thought I had dropped my Tommy gun, which I had just bought full ammo for accidentally when I went to pick up a shotgun. And I was trying to pick up all the Tommy guns that had been dropped, and I couldn't. I was like, what the fuck? I went back to where I dropped mine, and I couldn't find it. And I was like, come on. And then it finally popped up, like, a little hint that said, like, to switch weapons, use the V key to bring up the weapon wheel.
Well, that's the other thing that makes no sense, is that they got rid of the 2-weapon system, like the Halo system, but then they also made it so that you can still only have 2 weapons out, and you hit E or whatever to rapid switch between those 2 weapons that you have out. But then if you hold down E, you get the wheel to put any of your weapons into one of the 2 outsourced on your GUI hot switch weapon buttons. And it makes no sense and is really confusing, because looking at the screen and tapping E, it looks like you only can carry 2 guns. You have to hold down E and then like opt into a different weapon. Again, it's just really confusing.
Campster reveals 2 unflattering truths about himself here. I'll start with the more direct one before getting to the juiciest tidbit. The first thing you need to understand is that both Bioshock Infinite and Burial at Sea are made for consoles, not just PC. If you look at the 2 of them, it should be extremely obvious that the language of button pressing is different from one to the other. When they ported Half-Life 2 to console, Valve made so that you could switch between guns using the D-pad as a substitute to pressing individual keys. The problem with this is that it's really slow and inconvenient. I've taken a lot of unnecessary damage because of this while playing it. By contrast, Ratchet & Clank makes it so that you can quick tap between the last 2 guns you use via the triangle button. You can always pull out the weapon wheel, but the quick tap allows for quick and immediate decisions without the need for a specific hotkey for each gun, which would have been impossible. Later on, the franchise briefly allowed you to tap between the last 3 guns, and after that, they incorporated the D-pad to bounce between 4 pre-selected guns. The point of this tangent is that a quick tap option like this makes quick selection of guns more convenient for console players. You can be a PC elitist all you want, but designing a game for consoles without taking consideration for how the controllers work is poor design. Campster's bewilderment over why they would make this decision showcases how little he knows of good design. But that's not even the best part of this throwaway criticism. I'm going to play some footage from the main game, and I want you all to pay attention. Put down whatever you're doing and look at the screen. You see that? The quick tap feature also exists in the main game, for the Vigors. Now, here's what I find strange. Neither in this video, nor the diecast special about Infinite, does Campster ever express the same confusion over the quick tap function of the Vigors. So, that can only mean one thing. He played through the game twice without ever noticing it. Now, someone explain to me how it's possible to play through Infinite twice without ever noticing the quick tap feature, but to notice it in Burial Sea after playing it only once. It doesn't make a lick of sense. There's only one explanation. Campster didn't use the Vigors extensively enough to pass judgment on them. I'm not saying that Campster's a liar, though that's certainly a possibility here. In fact, there's at least 1 or 2 bits of footage in his video that shows the quick tap feature. But only 1 or 2. Rather, I'm saying that he didn't engage the game in good faith, barely using its mechanics to a degree that would allow one to call him informed. But let's not stop there. Let's return to Campster's analysis of the Handyman. When discussing it earlier, Campster called it a war of attrition, and I think I know why.